mind, writing, editing, working with the superb CBS News team to gather and report the news. The daily, constant pressure of being the best. And there's only one place you can find this anchorman, this editor, this team.
Good evening. After strong
Cronkite and Company, only on the CBS Evening News.
When you're on the road with Charles Kuralt, that road's a whole nation wide and just as big in surprises. Americans are special people, doing the unexpected with delight. Being on the road with Charles Kuralt's a non-stop joyride.
Good evening. After strong
Cronkite and Company, only on the CBS Evening News.
This is NBC News Update, brought to you by American Express Traveler's Checks. Here is Tom Snyder.
Good evening. Gary Gilmore is to die by firing squad Monday, 2 days after he's 36. That's what he wants, but somebody might appeal. NBC News correspondent Irving R. Levine says Soviet leader Brezhnev told Treasury Secretary Simon he won't needle Jimmy Carter. Economic indicators stayed level in October after 2 bad drops. The watchword now, cautious optimism. Jose Lopez Portillo is Mexico's new president, facing restless peasants, shrunken pesos, and big debts there. Angola, finally a member of the United Nations tonight. At Cape Canaveral, they knocked down the old gantry from which the first astronauts flew. And President Ford's suburban Washington home is for sale. He wants $137,000. He paid $34,000, but there is a pool. That's tonight's update from NBC News, New York.
The leader in television is now a leader in television news because ABC News brings news makers up close. Because ABC News people know their beats. People like Frank Reynolds, Max Robinson, Peter Jennings, Barbara Walters, and scores more. And because ABC News is wherever news is, across town, across the world, or across the universe. The leader in television is now a leader in television news. See for yourself. Watch ABC's World News tonight.
An ABC News Brief brought to you by Budweiser Beer. Now from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Good evening. Federal Judge L.C. Hastings, the first sitting federal judge ever tried on criminal charges, was found not guilty today of conspiring to take a bribe. Rita Lavelle, a top official of the Environmental Protection Agency, resigned unexpectedly today. Lavelle has been accused of lying under oath before Congress. The unemployment rate fell by 0.4% last month to 10.4%. That's the first drop in unemployment in 18 months. Now this.
This Bud's for all the guys who keep the action from getting out of hand.
Hold all you do.
This Bud's for you.
Singing star Karen Carpenter died today of an apparent heart attack at the age of 32. In the past, she had suffered from the weight loss condition known as anorexia nervosa. Tonight on Nightline, drug and alcohol addiction among doctors, nurses, and pharmacists.
NBC Nightly News. With John Chancellor in New York, Chief Washington Correspondent Roger Mudd, and tonight's special segment, Part 2 of our report, Moscow's Secret Stealers.
Good evening. Millions of people mourned the tragic death of John Lennon today. The young and the middle-aged shared a sense of grief over the inexplicable slaying of Lennon, murdered by a young man who had been a fan of Lennon and the Beatles for the last 15 years. The killing took place last night as Lennon and his wife, Yoko Ono, were entering their Manhattan apartment house called the Dakota. Crowds gathered soon after, and many just stayed outside.
Special report on Apollo 13. At ABC News Space Center, here is ABC Science Editor Jules Bergman.
Whatever happened there, whether it was an explosion, whether a line ruptured, a tank blew up, it knocked out the fuel cells and began bleeding off their oxygen supply at the same time. And the decision was made to abort the flight. The question was how to save the lives of the astronaut. Now, the burn is expected. Our emergency took place at about 55 hours into the flight at about 10 p.m. tonight. The bailout burn, we should call it, though that's not the true name, the emergency burn of the DIPS engine, is expected at around 79 hours into the flight at about 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow night. The question is how to do it exactly and where to strike for.
Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger. The worst disaster in the history of spaceflight. The Space Shuttle Challenger blows apart, killing all 7 people on board.
1 minute, 15 seconds.
NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Tonight from Washington, D.C. It was a nightmare, a cruel, shocking end to what everyone expected to be another triumph for the Space Shuttle program. The Challenger, with a school teacher and 6 regular astronauts on board, was consumed by a giant fireball explosion less than 2 minutes after it was launched into the bright blue Florida skies at 11:38 Eastern Time this morning.
This is NBC News Update. Here is Jessica Savage.
Good evening. Soviet President Brezhnev arrived in Prague today for a meeting of the Czech Communist Party. Sources say that meeting was prompted by the continuing problems in Poland. Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger said today in London that Brezhnev's emergency trip to Prague underlines the seriousness of the Polish situation. President Reagan's top economic advisor, Murray Wiedenbaum, warned today that Americans should not expect relief from double-digit inflation before the end of the year. And it's all systems go for the space shuttle. The countdown set to begin tonight at 11:30 Eastern Time, with the launching scheduled for this Friday morning. I'm Jessica Savage in New York. More news later on this NBC station.
When you want to know, you know where to turn. No one knows the world like CBS News, the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. America sends in the Marines. He told you where. A city erupts into violence. He told you why. A nation marks its revolution. He told you how. Tom Fenton, CBS News. When you want to know, you know where to turn. No one knows the world like CBS News, the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
From CBS News, this is Newsbreak. In the Senate, the filibuster has ended, but the angry words haven't. After the administration helped bust the filibuster, Senator Aberesk accused President Carter of lying. The issue, natural gas decontrol, still hasn't been resolved. Over 1,500 chemicals manufactured in the U.S. are suspected of causing cancer. For the first time, the Labor Department proposes a systematic approach to regulating them. Corruption is the charge, and Indira Gandhi is the accused. The former Indian Prime Minister is under arrest. To ease the growing strain between Washington and Israel, the White House again today argued U.S. Middle East policy has not changed. The Census Bureau says that while inflation went up last year, the median family income went up even more. The first time in 3 years that's happened.
This remarkable scientific medicine helps relieve most cold symptoms caused by every known virus. Every known virus. It's Contact.
I'm Morton Dean, CBS News, New York. More news later on this CBS station.
Monday night, Doug gets fired and Betty sends Tracy on a mercy date.
Why don't you do it?
Tracy, the man feels bad enough.
Later, Victoria's father pops in.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And Maude pops out.
This is a special report from CBS News. A World Airways DC-10 has skidded into the harbor off Logan International Airport in Boston. 190 people are reportedly on board. Rescue operations are underway. Police, ambulances, and Coast Guard units have been dispatched to the scene. No immediate reports of casualties. Boston police say at least some of the passengers have been rescued. This has been a special report from CBS News.
Look at our past and to move forward together into our future. These bicentennial minutes have focused attention on all aspects of the birth of our nation, which established American freedom and kept its promise alive. The bicentennial year and the bicentennial minutes end tonight. As our first resolution of the new year, let us pledge to keep the spirit of 76 alive. Thank you, and a Happy New Year to you all.
An ABC News Brief brought to you by Anheuser-Busch. Now from New York, Tom Gerald.
Good evening. In Beirut tonight, an uneasy ceasefire is holding, but Lebanese Christian leaders predict it won't last long. More than 40 policemen were injured today in Londonderry, Northern Ireland, when rioting broke out between Catholic marchers and Protestants. Officials in Salisbury say the biracial government there plans to lift all remaining segregation laws in Rhodesia this week. In Hawaii, incumbent George Ariyoshi has won the Democratic primary for governor, virtually assuring him of re-election. Now this.
Michelob. Have a nice weekend. Weekends were made for Michelob.
Yeah.
A report in the Journal of the American Medical Association claims 20 to 30% of critically injured people die needlessly because ambulances often take them to the wrong hospitals. That's News Brief. Further details on the ABC News Weekend Report.
NBC Sunday Big Event returns following these messages.
This is NBC News Update, brought to you by Budweiser. Here is Jane Pauley.
Good evening. Poland's Communist Party chief Stanislaw Kania met today with Czech leader Gustav Husak, who warned that Poland looks like Czechoslovakia before the Soviet invasion in 1968. In Atlanta, the list of black children found dead is up to 17. Another child was identified today. Home heating oil will soon cost $1.50 a gallon, according to the chairman of the board of Amoco. Former Beatle Ringo Starr has joined Paul McCartney on the Caribbean island of Montserrat. Sources say the surviving Beatles will reunite to make an album dedicated to the late John Lennon. I'm Jane Pauley in New York. More news later on this NBC station.
This is Bill Monroe inviting you to meet the press with the Republican leader of the Senate, Howard Baker of Tennessee.
Meet the Press, the world's oldest network television program, is a public affairs presentation of NBC News. Meet the Press is brought to you by Exxon, people working to find and develop new sources of energy for you.
Involved the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty. David?
Can't find it. Sorry.
Cosmetics manufacturers won't be greatly affected, but the Maraschino Cherry Association said today that this action will ruin the $100 million a year maraschino cherry industry. David?
If there is ice on Mars, it seems reasonable to conclude there is water. The scientists involved with the Viking project have so concluded. They have new pictures from Mars, and Roy Neal tells us how they look.
This is NBC Nightly News with David Brinkley in Washington and John Chancellor in New York.
Today, the Carter administration proposed new federal regulations to require savings institutions to lend money in all neighborhoods. John?
It's the view of Arthur Burns, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, that a continued decline in the value of the American dollar would fuel inflation here at home and cause economic catastrophe around the world.
Collecting both government salaries and welfare. Most of them probably are guilty of fraud. John?
There's a blizzard in the upper Middle West, the Dakotas, Minnesota, and parts of Nebraska and Iowa. It is the worst late autumn blizzard in 37 years in that area.
This is NBC News Update, brought to you by American Express Travelers Checks. Here is Lloyd Dobbins.
Good evening. Here's some news. The president of North Yemen and his brother have been assassinated. That's according to radio broadcast from there, but that's about all the broadcast said. The Israeli cabinet has approved a working paper on Middle East peace talks negotiated by Foreign Minister Dayan and Secretary of State Vance. The Supreme Court has been urged by black members of Congress and less directly by the Civil Rights Commission to rule against a reverse discrimination suit. And Army inspectors did some checking, worked out the figures, and said it looks like more than $118 million worth of inventory is missing. But there's $89 million worth on stuff on hand that shouldn't be there. So it goes.
This traveler's check can give you an emergency refund 24 hours a day all across America. American Express traveler's checks. Don't leave home without them.
This is NBC News Update, brought to you by American Express Travelers Checks. Here is Linda Ellerby.
Good evening. One Israeli compared it to the landing of men on the moon. And if it was not that strange, it was close. In Jerusalem, the flag of Egypt and the flag of Israel, side by side. The president of Egypt, Anwar Sadat, and the prime minister of Israel, Menachem Begin, side by side. Speeches to the Israeli parliament, no specific concessions from either country. To many Israelis, Sadat was too tough. To many Arabs, he was not tough enough.
Tonight, a working dinner. Tomorrow, a joint news conference. There is no agreement on peace in the Mideast tonight, but there is a hope and a historic meeting. And that in itself is more of a step toward peace than these two nations have seen in more than 30 years. I'm Linda Ellerby in Washington. More news later.
This is NBC News Update, brought to you by Ford Mustang. Here is John Hart.
Good evening. NBC News has learned that the Shah of Iran, after the worst riots there in 10 years, is likely to appoint a military government. The civilian prime minister is said to have resigned today. In Nicaragua, President Somoza says he will not resign no matter how much pressure President Carter puts on him. Most of the Arab leaders demanded President Sadat of Egypt throw away the Camp David agreements. This in a summit conference in which the Arab leaders could not agree on how to punish Sadat if he does make peace with Israel. As many as 13 people are believed dead in a hotel fire in Honesdale, Pennsylvania that may have been started deliberately. And the newspaper strike is over in New York City. I'm John Hart. More news later on this NBC station.
Start your late nights with The King, the Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, followed by TV's most unpredictable laugh riot, Late Night with David Letterman. It's better late than ever on NBC.
This is NBC News Update, sponsored by Budweiser. Here is Stephen Frazier.
Good evening. In Puerto Rico today, a battle between police and 300 squatters living on government land. A policeman was killed. 10 people were hurt. The squatters were evicted. Turnout heavy today at polls around Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Neighbors of the nuclear power plant at 3 Mile Island were asked if they favor a partial restart of the plant, crippled 3 years ago in the nation's worst nuclear accident. Argentine diplomats at the United Nations responded tonight to the latest British peace proposal. The response isn't known yet. One official said it reaffirms Argentina's wish for a peaceful settlement. Now this.
Here's to the New York Islanders for skating their way to a Stanley Cup hat trick. This Bud's for you.
The United Auto Workers tonight granted American Motors a package of concessions adding up to $115 million. I'm Stephen Frazier.
NBC Movie of the Week will return following these messages.
The SCTV Comedy Network is on the air.
Let's go, boys, while the going's hot.
It's all new and better than ever next Friday on NBC.
This is NBC News Update. Here is Jane Pauley.
Good evening. Secretary of State Haig says he's won a pledge from Egypt and Israel to continue the Middle East peace process. Haig also said U.S. arms shipments to Egypt and Sudan will be stepped up due to threats from Libya. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety is recommending that high school driver education programs be abolished and that teenagers be allowed to drive during the daytime only. The Institute says driver training encourages more teens to drive and that night driving is often mixed with drinking. The Sierra Club says it's collected more than 1 million signatures demanding the removal of Interior Secretary James Watt. I'm Jane Pauley in New York. More news later on this NBC station.
Now, Tom Gerald.
Good evening. Panamanians voted today on the proposed Panama Canal treaties. A small sampling of some early returns show they approved them overwhelmingly 2-1. The final decision's up to the U.S. Senate. On his way back to Washington after a cross-country trip, President Carter stopped in Minneapolis to pick up Senator Hubert Humphrey. It's Humphrey's first trip to Washington since doctors found he has inoperable cancer. Boxer Joe Louis was hospitalized in Las Vegas today after suffering what doctors believe to be a heart attack. Louis is 63. The German government says it wants to handle security at 13 worldwide airports where flights headed for Germany depart. The reason, lack security at some airports. Now this.
Kmart. Save cooking time with this Miramatic 6-quart pressure cooker. Save over 30% with Kmart's sale price of just $15.
More than 5,000 people were on the starting line, including one man in a wheelchair, but when the New York Marathon ended, the winner was former teacher Bill Rogers. Bob Hall in his wheelchair also managed to go the full 26 miles. That's News Brief. More news later on this ABC station.
The San Pedro beach bums play Cupid when a lovesick Russian sailor jumps ship and swims to their boat asking for help to find his girl.
This is NBC News Update with John Schubeck.
51-year-old Priscilla Ford is being held on a charge of murder tonight in Reno. 5 people dead when she drove a car onto a sidewalk yesterday in the city's gaming area. DA says these crimes involved could be punishable by death in the gas chamber. The situation on the fire lines in Southern California continues to improve, though many of those battling the flames are dog-tired, hampered by the flu, colds, and smoke inhalation. Total damage from these fires now close to $30 million. Iran claims to have gone on the offensive in its 2-month-old war with Iraq, this after a sea battle today in which Iran claims to have sunk 9 Iraqi gunboats. The Iranian President Bani Sadr called it an important psychological as well as military victory. An Iranian official says preparations for the transfer of the hostages to the government continue, and the problem now is where to put them. John Schubeck, NBC News.
Since he came out of the West to team with David Brinkley back in 1956, Chuck Humphrey has been our competitor, and what a competitor. But he also is a colleague and a good friend. Tonight, over on that other network, as we say, he's saying goodnight to David for the last time on their evening newscast, returning to his native Montana to build a resort, and I suspect perhaps to get involved in politics. As he leaves the daily broadcast scene, a giant departs the stage, for journalism and for ourselves.
At the risk of sounding presumptuous, I would say to all of you, be patient and have courage, for there will be better and happier news one day, if we work at it. And David, thanks for these years of happy association, and for being such an easy colleague to work with, and for all the kindnesses.
Chet, I too would like to thank all of those who tune us in and put up with us, particularly including those who write the nasty letters. McGee and Chancellor and I will be here every night, and we'll miss you. I really don't want to say it, but the time has come, and so for the last time, good luck and good night, Chet.
Good luck, David, and good night for NBC News.
But that's the way it is. Friday, July 31st, 1970. Goodbye, Chet.
Bye, and good luck, Walter.
Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color, this has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.